My twin sister found that she looks strikingly similar to a billionaire's wife. Determined to take her place, Zoe arranged a meeting and plotted to stage a car accident to kill the woman. I arrived just in time to stop her. On the drive home, I tried to reason with her. Daisy's boss built his empire from nothing. He's ruthless, sharp as a blade, and hides danger behind every smile. He'll see through your petty schemes instantly. And when he does, he'll drag our entire family down with you. Zoe nodded, pretending to agree. But once we got home, she slipped a lethal dose of weed killer into my glass of water. As I lay dying, she whispered in my ear, "You're just jealous. Jealous that I have the face to marry into a wealthy dynasty. You ruined my dream, so I'm destroying you." When I opened my eyes again, I was sent back to the exact day Zoe planned to meet Silas's wife. A deafening metal crash tore through the air. We bolted from her hiding spot and rushed to the motionless woman, lying on the pavement, screaming dramatically, "Forget the car. Call 911 right now." Perfectly made up, Zoe began performing CPR without hesitation, even pressing her mouth to the strangers for rescue breaths. Blood stained her pristine white dress like a dark flower, painting her as a selfless, brave hero to every onlooker. The ambulance arrived, followed closely by reporters. Zoe spun toward the cameras, feigning righteous anger. "Have you no decency? Why are you filming at a time like this? A life hangs in the balance." She turned back to the paramedics, voice urgent and trembling. "Doctor, please save her. She's so beautiful. It would be such a tragedy if she dies." Moved by her apparent sincerity, the doctor reassured her. "We'll do everything we can, miss. Do you know her family?" Zoe shook her head, the picture of a concerned stranger. "I'm just a passerby, but I'll ride with you to the hospital. I'll cover all her medical bills." The doctor praised her kindness and let her board the ambulance. As Zoe turned, she swiftly pocketed the victim's phone. Almost invisible motion. I watched the ambulance speed away, sirens fading into the distance. 30 minutes later, a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up. Silas, boss's assistant, stepped out. I recognized him instantly. He surveyed the scene and spoke to the police. I texted Zoe. "Zoe, I just saw you on the news. What did you do?" Her reply came instantly. "None of your business." A slow smile spread across my face. Zoe had read too many billionaire romance novels. She thought every powerful man was foolish. After one casual comment from Silas, "You look just like my wife." When she was younger, she became obsessed with marrying into his wealth. My past life. I begged her to be reasonable, and she poisoned me to death for it. This time, my only goal was to cut myself completely out of her mess. When Silas's vengeance falls on her, I won't get caught in the crossfire. I was about to leave when my phone rang. It was the hospital blood bank. A patient desperately needed my rare blood type, and they asked if I could donate. Zoe and I shared this rare blood type. Our information was on file. Without hesitation, when I never imagined the patient was Silas' boss's wife. After donating, I went to the waiting room to rest. Zoe was already there. She froze when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" "I got a call. Someone needed my blood type. So I came," I said calmly, sitting down. "What about you? Why were you at the accident scene?" "I've done everything to stop her plan before. Even threatened to call the police." She eyed me wearily. "Just a coincidence, I was passing by." "All right," I said, dropping the subject. I closed my eyes, pretending to be exhausted. But Zoe couldn't resist bragging. "Lila, do you know who that woman is? She's the wife of the richest man in the city. Silas' boss. He said I look exactly like her when she was young. When she dies, I'll be the next Mrs. Boss." In my past life, I told her to stop dreaming. This time I played along. "Wow, congratulations. When you're rich and famous, can you get me a job at Voscorp?" My flattering response pleased her greatly. She scoffed. "Mom and Dad were right about you. You were born to be a nobody worker. I'm about to have unlimited wealth, and all you care about is a job." Just then, Silas' boss's voice echoed down the hallway. Zoe's eyes lit up. She jumped up, ready to impress him immediately. "Hide." She hissed at me. "Don't you dare ruin this for me. We were twins." But she was terrified I'd steal Silas's attention. She had nothing to worry about right now. I wanted nothing more than to stay as far away from her as possible. When justice comes for her, I don't want to be dragged down with her. But then a cold, cruel smile crossed her face. "Though with your face, it won't matter if he sees you anyway." Her meaning was clear. We were twins, but not identical. Her features were stunning, while mine were plain. I was the original sketch. It was the filtered, perfect masterpiece. So we started out of the room. Seconds later, I heard her sweet, sickly voice cooing and comforting Silas in the hallway. Weak from blood donation. I curled up in the chair and fell asleep. When I woke, the hallway was silent. I checked the time and decided to leave. The elevator was slow, so I took the stairs. The second I pushed open the stairwell door, I heard voices. Silas Boss and his assistant, Mr. Boss. We tracked Mrs. Boss's phone. The last signal was here at the hospital, but it's gone now. I froze, holding my breath. Thankfully, they didn't notice me. Silas's voice was ice cold. Investigate quietly. Don't involve the police. Serafina would never come to a neighborhood like this. Something's wrong. That girl, Zoe. She's suspicious. Start with her. He added in a deadly whisper. Mark, if I find out who did this to my Serafina, I'll make their entire family pay. A cold chill ran down my spine. The rumors were true. Before becoming a CEO, Silas was a notorious street fighter who had served time in prison. Terrified, I rushed home. I heard Zoe and my parents laughing inside. Mom fussed over Zoe, praising her sacrifice, donating blood, paying medical bills, and bought her supplements. Zoe waved her off carelessly. You have to spend money to make money. Paying her bill. This is the only way to stay close to Silas. Dad sighed. You could have just given them money. Why donate blood? Yours is a rare type. It'll take forever to recover. Then, how else would she die? Zoe grinned cunningly. I did my research. Serafina Voss is severely allergic to mangoes. I ate 3 mangoes right before donating blood. She doesn't stand a chance. The 3 of them fantasized happily about their luxurious new life. Once Zoe married into the Voss family, that's when I stepped out. How could you do something like this? I stared at Zoe, voice trembling with fake shock. The room went silent. I grabbed her arm, pretending to drag her to the door. It's not too late. We can go to the police and confess. Zoe shoved me away. Are you insane, Lila? My plan is perfect. That neighborhood has no security cameras. The car is already disposed of. As long as you stay quiet, no one will ever suspect us. I narrowed my eyes. Do you really think all rich people are as stupid as you? Why would Serafina Voss be in such a rundown area? No cameras doesn't mean no witnesses. You even brought reporters here. You're an idiot. Zoe hesitated briefly, then regained her confidence. They won't suspect me. Why are you so upset? Are you just jealous? I'm scared you'll destroy our whole family. If you don't turn yourself in, I'll call the police. Before I finished speaking, Dad grabbed my hair violently, yanked me back, and kicked my leg hard. I crumpled to my knees in pain, but he didn't stop. He slapped me twice across the face, his rings cutting my cheek. Your sister is doing this for our family. And you want to call the cops? I should have strangled you when you were a baby. Hit her. Mom screamed. She's a worthless brat who only learns from punishment. Zoe stood with crossed arms, smirking coldly. Harder, Dad. Make sure she can't ruin our chance. I endured the beating. It was exactly like my past life. After Zoe poisoned me, I begged for medical help. Instead, they locked me in my room and watched me die. I never understood why they loved her and hated me. We were twins. She got new clothes and a good school. I wore rags and was treated like her servant. Pain surged, and I screamed silently, counting down the seconds. Minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Our neighbor asked about the noise. Dad instantly calmed his voice, acting polite. Nothing. Our daughter just fell. He closed the door and kicked me one last time. You learned your lesson. In the past, I would have stayed defiant. This time, I acted like a terrified rabbit. I'm sorry, Dad. I was wrong. I won't say anything about Zoe. He was still angry. Are you still going to the police? Never. I won't. After I begged for forgiveness from all of them, Dad's anger faded. Stop crying. Mom snapped coldly. Go make dinner. We're hungry. I obeyed. Put on an apron and walked to the kitchen. Just then, Zoe's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and screamed sharply. She's dead, Serafina. Boss is dead. I have to go to the hospital. To comfort Silas, she rushed to her room, changed outfits, redid her makeup, and put on high heels, worried for her safety. Late at night, Mom and Dad took the car to drive her. Once they left, I packed my bags. It was time to leave this house forever. On my way out, I met the neighbor again. He frowned at my bruised face. They hurt you again? He looked at my suitcase inside. Good. Leave here. If you stay any longer, they'll kill you. I thanked him and hailed a taxi. The radio broadcasted breaking news. The wife of the city's richest man had died in a tragic hit and run. Silas Boss offered a $1 million reward for information on the driver. The taxi driver whistled. That driver is bold. A man that rich will hunt him down easily. I murmured quietly. I heard Silas was a gangster before he met his wife and turned his life around. Now that she's gone, whoever crosses him is doomed. The person about to face his wrath had no idea what was coming. Over the next few days, the internet loaded with two stories: Silas Boss's heartbroken plea for justice and Zoe's viral heroic image. Her photo performing CPR in a bloodstained dress went viral worldwide. Everyone called her an angel. Another video showed Zoe crying silently at the hospital. "I'm so sorry," she told reporters. Voice breaking, "I tried my best, but I couldn't save Mrs. Boss." In the background, Silas Boss stared at her with an unreadable expression. "We sent this video to our family group chat. Look how Silas looks at me. He's falling for me." Mom and Dad praised her wildly, lost in their delusional fantasy. I sent one reply: "He's definitely moved. Moved to kill." As expected, Zoe flew into a rage. She sent screenshots of her chats with Silas. Hundreds of intimate messages with Silas, saying her comfort meant everything to him. "Still think he doesn't love me?" she sent smugly. I replied, "Or maybe he's just manipulating you for information. Silas can have any woman he wants." "Why you?" Zoe exploded. "Lila, I haven't forgotten what you did. Want another beating?" Dad replied, "We know where you are. Don't test us." They threatened to kill me if I went to the police. Put my phone away and looked out the window. After leaving home, I rented a small apartment in the same rundown industrial district where Serafina was hit. Every day, I saw Silas's assistant Mark interviewing locals and collecting security footage. Days later, Zoe posted another screenshot in the group chat. An invitation from Silas Boss for her and our parents to his private estate. To thank her personally, she tagged me Lila. "Now, do you see how charming I am? This isn't dinner. He's welcoming me into his life." I didn't reply. Zoe was too obsessed with her plan to notice critical details. All news about Serafina's death was deleted online. Police stopped investigating. Mark hadn't been seen in the neighborhood for 2 days. "This is not normal," I sighed, ready to head home for dinner. Just then, a black luxury car stopped in front of me. The tinted rear window rolled down with a soft, electric hum. The air in the alley seemed to drop 10 degrees. Silas Voss sat in the back seat, his face half hidden in the shadows, his eyes locked onto mine. They were the eyes of a predator, flat, cold, and utterly devoid of the romantic charm my sister so foolishly believed in. In the front seat, his assistant, Mark, turned his head. "Get in, Lila." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't run. Running from a man like Silas only proved guilt. I gripped the handle of my worn purse, opened the door, and slid into the leather interior. The doors locked instantly. For a long moment, the only sound was the quiet purr of the engine. Silas didn't look at me. He was staring out the window at the rotting brickwork of my apartment building. "You don't look much like her," he said. His voice was a low gravel, smooth but carrying an undeniable edge of violence. "We're fraternal," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I got the brains. She got the delusion." A ghost of a smirk played on Mark's lips in the rearview mirror, but Silas remained stone-faced. He slowly turned his head to face me. "You moved out of your family home 3 days ago, the exact night my wife died. You rented a cheap room in the very neighborhood where the hit-and-run occurred. A smart man might think you were involved and trying to hide." "A smarter man," I countered, "would know that if I were involved, I wouldn't have moved to the active crime scene. I moved here because it was the one place my family wouldn't look for me. They think this neighborhood is beneath them." Silas leaned forward, resting his hands on a silver-tipped walking cane. "Tell me why you ran." I looked him dead in the eye. "Because my sister is a psychopath who reads too many billionaire romance novels, and my parents are her enablers. I tried to stop her. I told them she was insane. In return, my father beat me to the floor and they threatened to kill me if I went to the police. I left because I knew you would eventually find out the truth, Mr. Voss. And when you did, I didn't want to be in the blast radius." Silas studied me, searching for a lie. He found none. "What truth?" he murmured softly. "Enlighten me." I reached into my purse. Mark instantly tensed, reaching into his jacket, but Silas raised a single finger, stopping him. I pulled out my cheap smartphone, opened my voice memos, and pressed play. It was a recording I had taken through the crack of the door right after I was beaten, just before I packed my bags. Zoe's sickly sweet voice filled the quiet car. "I did my research. Serafina Voss is severely allergic to mangoes. I ate 3 mangoes right before donating blood. She doesn't stand a chance." Followed by my parents' sickening laughter. Crack. I flinched. The crystal glass Silas had been holding in his left hand was reduced to shards. Blood welled up from his palm, dripping onto the pristine leather seats, but he didn't even blink. His expression didn't change, but the sheer, suffocating aura of murderous rage flooding the car was palpable. "She didn't die from the crash," I said quietly, turning off the phone. "The impact broke her ribs, yes. But she died of anaphylactic shock in the ICU. Zoe guaranteed it. She also pocketed your wife's phone at the scene. Mark handed Silas a handkerchief. Silas wrapped it around his bleeding hand, his breathing slow and heavy. Mark, Silas whispered, is the estate ready? Yes, sir. The guests are scheduled to arrive at 8 o'clock. Silas turned his dark, hollow eyes back to me. I was an animal before I met Serafina. I lived in the dirt. I fought in the dirt. She cleaned the blood off my hands and taught me how to be human. Your sister took my humanity away. He leaned closer, the scent of expensive cologne and fresh copper filling my lungs. I invited your family to dinner tonight to thank them for their heroism. Tell me, Lila, do you want to go to the police? Or do you want to see how a man like me says thank you? A dark, twisted sense of vindication bloomed in my chest. I thought of my past life, the burning agony of the weed killer tearing through my throat, my parents stepping over my convulsing body to help Zoe pack her bags. I don't trust the police to hurt them enough, I said coldly. I want a front row seat. Silas nodded once. Drive. The Voss estate was situated on a sprawling cliffside overlooking the ocean, isolated from the rest of the world by miles of private forest. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. When we arrived, I was escorted not to the grand dining hall, but to a darkened security room hidden behind the walls. A massive two-way mirror offered a perfect, panoramic view of the opulent dining room below. Speakers on the control console transmitted every sound. Mark pulled up a plush leather chair for me and set a pot of hot tea on the table. Enjoy the show, Mark said, his voice stripped of all professional courtesy. He sounded like an executioner eager to pull the lever. At exactly 8 p.m., the heavy mahogany doors of the dining room swung open. I almost laughed out loud when I saw them. Zoe stepped in first, wearing a stunning, pearl-white evening gown. My stomach churned when I recognized it. She had found a knockoff of the exact dress Serafina had worn in a highly publicized Vogue spread last year. Her hair was styled to mimic Serafina's. She looked like a cheap, desperate ghost. Behind her, my parents shuffled in, trying and failing to look sophisticated. My mother was touching the imported silk wallpaper, whispering about how much it must cost, while my father was eyeing the silver candelabras like he was calculating their pawn value. Wow, Zoe breathed, spinning in the center of the room. Mom, Dad, look at this. This is where I'm going to live. Play your cards right tonight, sweetie, my mother whispered aggressively. Act shy, act traumatized by the accident. Men like that love a damsel in distress. I know what I'm doing, Zoe snapped. He sent me hundreds of messages. He's practically obsessed with me. Suddenly, the double doors at the far end of the room opened, and Silas walked in. He had changed into a tailored black suit. His hand was bandaged, hidden beneath his cuff. He looked every inch the grieving, powerful billionaire. Zoe immediately shifted her posture, dropping her shoulders and widening her eyes to look soft and vulnerable. Mr. Voss, she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Silas, thank you so much for having us. I know this must be an incredibly difficult time for you. Silas stopped at the head of the long table. He didn't offer to shake their hands. He just stared at Zoe, his eyes raking over the dress she wore. For a second, a flicker of pure, unadulterated hatred crossed his face, but he buried it beneath a smooth, chilling smile. Zoe, Silas said smoothly. Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Please, sit. They scrambled into the antique chairs. Silas sat at the head of the table. I must admit, Zoe, Silas began as a line of silent, stone-faced waiters emerged from the shadows to pour wine. Your presence has been illuminating for me. You resemble my late wife so strongly. Zoe blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I know. You mentioned that at the hospital. I can't help but feel like it was destiny that I was there that day. Fate brought me to her, to try and save her for you. Fate, Silas repeated softly, rolling the word around in his mouth like a bitter pill. Yes, fate. Tell me, Zoe, how did you happen to be in the industrial district that afternoon? Zoe didn't miss a beat. I was taking a shortcut home from a friend's house. I was completely lost. And then, I heard the crash. She pressed a hand to her chest, acting out a shudder. It was horrifying. But I didn't even think. I just ran to her. I got her blood all over my dress. I wanted her to live. My mother chimed in, eager to solidify the lie. Zoe has always been like that, Mr. Voss. An angel. Selfless. She even donated her own rare blood at the hospital without a second thought. It took a massive toll on her body. In the security room, I took a slow sip of my tea. The trap was set. Is that so? Silas murmured. He snapped his fingers. The waiter stepped forward and lifted the silver cloches from the plates in front of my family. Zoe looked down. Instead of a gourmet steak or caviar, her plate held a single, beautifully arranged dish, a bright, fresh mango salad. glazed with mango puree. Zoe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second.
Oh.
Mango. A delicacy, Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. My chef prepared it specially. Go ahead.
Eat.
Zoe hesitated, looking at her parents. My father shot her a warning glance, urging her to play along. Zoe picked up her fork. Thank you, Silas. I love mango. She took a bite. Silas watched her chew. The silence in the room stretched until it felt like a taut wire about to snap. Did you know, Silas said, leaning back in his chair, that my wife was deathly allergic to mangoes? So allergic, in fact, that even a trace amount in her bloodstream would cause immediate, catastrophic organ failure. Zoe froze. The fork slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the fine china. What a tragic irony, Silas continued, his voice cold and echoing in the massive room. That the heroic angel who donated her rare blood to save my wife had just eaten 3 mangoes before the transfusion. The color drained from Zoe's face entirely. Her pristine makeup suddenly looked like a clown's mask. I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't.
Don't lie to me, Silas snarled, his polite facade shattering. The sheer force of his voice made my parents jump out of their seats. Mark stepped out of the shadows, holding a small, clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a shattered smartphone. He tossed it onto the table. It slid and hit Zoe's plate. Serafina's phone, Silas said. Tracked via GPS to your family home. Found hidden in your bedside drawer by my men 3 hours ago. Mr. Voss, there must be a misunderstanding, my father stammered, standing up, sweat pouring down his forehead. Zoe is a good girl. She wouldn't. Shut up. Silas didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. 2 large men in black suits stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains, locking the dining room doors. My mother let out a muffled whimper, grabbing my father's arm. I don't believe in fate, Zoe, Silas said, standing up. He began to slowly walk around the table, the rhythmic tap of his cane echoing like a metronome, ticking down their lives. I believe in cause and effect. You wanted my wealth. You read a few pathetic romance novels and thought you could orchestrate a tragedy to take her place. Zoe was hyperventilating, pressing her back against the chair as Silas approached her. Silas, please, you sent me those messages. You said my comfort meant everything to you. You said. I needed to keep you complacent while I investigated, Silas sneered, stopping right behind her chair. Do you really think I would look at a cheap, hollow imitation of my wife and feel anything but disgust? Serafina was brilliant. She was kind. You're a leech. He gestured to Mark. Mark pressed a button on a remote. The massive painting on the wall slid aside, revealing a large flat-screen TV. A video began to play. It wasn't the heroic news footage. It was raw, grainy security footage from a camera hidden on a warehouse loading dock, the one Zoe thought didn't exist. The video showed Serafina's car broken down. It showed a black sedan speeding out of an alley, intentionally ramming her. But the worst part was after the crash. The footage showed Zoe stepping out of the shadows. It showed her standing over Serafina's broken body, perfectly calm. It showed Zoe pulling out her makeup compact, checking her reflection, and then deliberately tearing her own dress and smearing Serafina's blood on herself. Only when she heard the ambulance sirens did she drop to the floor and begin her dramatic, fake CPR. In the security room, I felt a chill run down my spine. Seeing it play out was 100 times more sickening than knowing it happened. In the dining room, my parents stared at the screen in absolute horror. Not because of what Zoe had done, but because they had been caught. The driver you hired off the dark web was an amateur, Silas said, leaning down to whisper directly into Zoe's ear. It took my men exactly 4 hours to find him. He gave you up before I even broke his second finger. He gave us the IP address. It traced back to your home router. Zoe let out a choked, ugly sob. No, it wasn't just me. I didn't do it alone. She whipped her head around, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at our parents. They knew. They helped me plan it. Dad gave me the money to hire the driver. Mom told me to use the mangoes. You lying bitch, my father roared. His survival instinct kicked in instantly. The man who had beaten me to the floor days ago to protect his golden child was now throwing her to the wolves without hesitation.
We didn't know anything.
Mr. Voss, I swear to God. She's crazy. She's always been crazy. We told her not to do it, but she threatened us. Yes, my mother shrieked, tears ruining her mascara. She poisoned our other daughter, Lila. She poisoned her twin sister to keep her quiet. We were terrified of her. Take her, Mr.
Voss.
Punish her, not us. I laughed softly in the dark security room. The loyalty of abusers is thinner than paper. Zoe looked at her parents, her eyes wide with betrayal. The illusion of her perfect family, her perfect plan, was crumbling into dust. You hypocrites, she screamed, lunging across the table at my mother, her fingers clawing like a wild animal. You loved it. You wanted the money just as much as I did. You told me to kill Lila. Before Zoe could reach across the table, Silas's men grabbed her by her hair and slammed her back into her chair. Enough, Silas commanded. Silence instantly fell over the room, save for Zoe's jagged breathing. Silas walked back to the head of the table. You destroyed the only good thing in my life. You thought I was just a wealthy fool. You forgot how I built this empire. He pulled out a thick folder and tossed it onto the table. Mr. Vance, Silas addressed my father. I bought the company you work for yesterday. You are fired. Furthermore, I've forwarded evidence of your embezzlement over the last 10 years to the board. You are completely bankrupt. My father's knees buckled. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands, weeping like a child. Mrs. Vance, Silas looked at my mother. I own the bank that holds the mortgage on your home. It's in foreclosure. As of this morning, all your assets are frozen. You have nothing. My mother let out a wail, falling to the floor and clutching at the hem of Silas's trousers. Please, please, we have nothing to do with this. Silas kicked her away with a look of utter revulsion. He finally turned his gaze back to Zoe. She was shaking violently, her perfect hair ruined, the white dress stained with sweat and the mango puree she had spilled. As for you, Zoe, Silas said softly, death is too easy. Death is a mercy I will not grant you. Mark opened the double doors. 2 uniformed police detectives walked in, followed by 4 armed officers. Mr. Voss, the lead detective said respectfully, we got the files your team sent over. It's all here. Conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and hiring a hitman. Take them, Silas said, turning his back on my family. Wait, Zoe screamed, thrashing against the officers as they slapped heavy steel handcuffs on her wrists. Wait, Silas, please. Look at me. Look at my face. I can be her. I can be Serafina. I love you. Silas paused. He turned his head slowly, looking at her with eyes as dead and dark as a starless night. You have her face, Silas whispered. But soon, you won't even have that. Zoe didn't understand what he meant until my father, utterly broken and enraged by the loss of his comfortable life, suddenly snapped. With a guttural scream, he lunged at Zoe. You ruined us. You ruined everything. Before the cops could pull him off, my father's hands found a steak knife that had fallen from the table. He slashed wildly. Zoe's agonizing, piercing shriek tore through the dining room. Blood sprayed across her pristine white gown, blooming exactly like it had on the day she faked her heroism. A deep, jagged gash ran from her temple, straight across her cheek, destroying the perfect masterpiece she valued above her own soul. Get him off her. The cops shouted, tackling my father to the ground and beating him with batons. My mother fainted. Zoe collapsed to the floor, her hands cuffed behind her back, unable to even touch her ruined face. She thrashed on the antique rug, her screams echoing off the high ceilings, a horrific symphony of shattered delusions. Through the two-way glass, I watched it all with cold, detached silence. I thought about the weed killer. I thought about the beatings. I thought about the decades of being told I was the worthless copy, the ugly duckling, the mistake. I finished my tea. It was still warm. The police dragged them out one by one. My father was bleeding and cursing. My mother was unconscious, carried out like a sack of garbage. And Zoe was sobbing, babbling incoherently about mansions and billionaires, her mind completely snapping as her face bled out onto her stolen dress. When the dining room was finally empty, save for Silas and Mark, the door to my security room clicked open. I walked out and stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at Silas.
He looked up at me.
The rage had drained out of him, leaving only a hollow, exhausted grief. It's done, Silas said quietly. The prosecutor is in my pocket. They will go to a maximum security prison. They will never see the sun again. The prisoners there know who they killed. Their lives will be hell.
Thank you, I said.
And I meant it. Silas nodded. Mark will give you a check for $5 million. Untraceable. Consider it compensation for your honesty and for the blood you gave trying to counteract what she did. I hesitated. I didn't do it for the money, Mr. Voss. I know, Silas said, turning toward the massive windows looking out over the dark ocean. Take it anyway. Change your name. Move far away. Live a quiet life. Do not ever look back. I walked down the stairs, accepted the briefcase Mark handed me, and walked toward the exit. As I reached the grand doors, I paused and looked back at the billionaire. He stood alone in the massive, silent room, a king in a graveyard of his own making, staring at the empty chair where his wife should have been. I stepped out into the cool night air. Epilogue. 3 years later, the coastal breeze of New Zealand was a stark contrast to the smoggy industrial district I had left behind. I sat on the porch of the small, beautiful cafe I had opened, wiping down the tables as the sun set over the turquoise water. I had changed my name to Elena. The $5 million was carefully invested. I lived a quiet, invisible, and utterly peaceful life. Occasionally, I checked the deep web for news. I didn't have to look hard today. My parents had both been sentenced to life in prison. Without Zoe's protection or Silas's money, my father was severely beaten in a prison riot in his first year and was now confined to a wheelchair, unable to speak. My mother had gone entirely mad in solitary confinement, spending her days scrubbing the walls of her cell, muttering about silk wallpaper. And Zoe. Zoe was placed in a high-security psychiatric prison. An article leaked by a tabloid featured a smuggled photo of her. I barely recognized her. The vicious scar across her face had healed terribly, pulling her eye downward and twisting her mouth into a permanent, grotesque sneer. Her head was shaved. The article mentioned that she spent her days hoarding plastic utensils, insisting to the wardens that she was Mrs. Voss, and that her billionaire husband was coming to pick her up in a black luxury car any day now. She was living in her romance novel forever, trapped in a cage of her own making. I closed my laptop. The bell above the cafe door chimed. A local fisherman walked in, smiling warmly. "Evening, Elena. Beautiful night, isn't it?" I looked out at the ocean, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. No scheming. No abuse. No fear. Just life. I smiled back, a genuine, original smile. "Yes," I said. "It's perfectly beautiful."